So basically, I took it from, we look at these students and we're wondering, why can't they access? We've given them the Go Talk and we know that they know how to use it. We've given them a Dynavox system. We've given them the amazing PEX board, and we know that they've done trials with us in the room and they can do it. But they're still not doing it. And what I found is that two things really keep students from accessing communication, and that's accessibility, first off, for those that have accessibility needs, and their emotional regulation, which has become so much more increasingly difficult lately. So by looking at it from that perspective, so we're going to look at engineering the classroom or your therapy room or wherever you're working, to get students to the best level of their communication by hitting those two main needs. So limits to communication, as we know, there are several limits. These are the three that we're focusing on today. So that's their educational limits, their physical, and then their sensory and emotional limits. Educational, we have to look at, are the students able to access the level of communication that we've set up for them? So sometimes, for example, and I take the Go Talk, we can give them a Go Talk 64, I believe, with all of these amazing words. Maybe they don't have that vocabulary yet. So are you looking at, maybe they need a Go Talk 1 or 20, and let's start with that and see, maybe they need easier words, maybe they need less words, maybe they're distracted by the amount on the page. So looking at their functional level educationally. We also want to look at their physical needs, and we'll get into that in a little more detail in the next slides, and then their sensory and emotional needs. And once we access all of this, they can better access the communication we're trying. So educational limitations. Is the student academically at the level of communication that we are giving them access to? So you have to look, is your student at the single word, phrase, or sentence level, or are they communicating at the communication level? What kind of vocabulary are they able to understand and able to comprehend? What level of vocabulary do they have access to and have they learned? And is it within, are we being biased in our vocabulary selection, or are we looking at vocabulary that they have been exposed to and would be comfortable with and understand how to use? Are we looking at language of the child? So let's look at different languages. Are they fully dominant in the English that you have that board set up in, or are they dominant in another language? And we have to be careful also not to let our biases in there, because a lot of times, we say, the student speaks English and they're exposed to English only in school, and the parents speak Spanish. So you know what? I'm going to make this PEX board and I'm going to put Spanish words on there and English symbols, and we're going to learn it that way. And I had a student one time, an intern that I was working with, who was just very frustrated. She made this beautiful communication book. And again, she took in the family's language into consideration, and she put Spanish words on the bottom of each of the symbols so the parent could understand what the child was using each for. And she said, it's still not working. They're not accessing it. And I said, did you look at any other communication partners that this child has? So she looked deeper, and when she interviewed the parent and asked them, she found out that the child was actually with a Polish speaking nanny most of the time. So when I changed the symbols over to Polish, that child's communication partner, who's Polish speaking, could then access the communication. And now the child started using it at home, because they were only with the parent a brief time, and they were with that babysitter for a larger portion of their day after school. So again, doing those interviews, deep testing, seeing where that difference is. And again, cultural differences, looking at dialectical differences in their language, making sure that you access language that they actually know how to use. Physical limitations. So we have to look at, is there limited mobility? Are they in a wheelchair? Are they using a walker? Are they partially mobile, where they can walk sometimes and in the wheelchair sometimes? So is this device or whatever you're giving them to use, is it accessible from where they're using it from? Do they have high tone or low tone? Do they have missing or additional limbs? And sometimes we don't take that into consideration as well. Are there any visual limitations, which we will look at further? Hearing as well, we're going to look into a little bit deeper. Are there height differences? So sometimes, we come up with this great board and we set it up and we mount it on the wall, but we mount it at our height, and we forget that the children are sometimes shorter or even taller than us. Is it something that they can easily access, or do they need a stool to get to it? So are we taking that into consideration as well? And balance. So again, we have these great boards and we're setting up, we stick this board on the door for the classroom, or we stick it on the wall, or we stick it on our therapy door in our room. And again, is the child able to stand on two legs long enough and able to balance, or are they bouncing, or are they moving, or are they rocking? Are they able to access the communication where you have it set up? So some physical accommodations that we can make is changing desk and chair height. And again, you can do this in the classroom, your therapy room, home care, if you're doing home care or EI. I had a parent who always wanted me to work with the child at the dining room table. And the problem with doing that at the dining room table is that the height was not accommodating for that child. So they could barely see over the table edge and it wasn't helping them. And I asked the mommy, I said, you know what, can we sit on the floor? Can we move this down? Is that okay? And once we did that, the child was better able to access the communication that I was putting out for them. Do we need risers? So for example, right now I'm using a riser for my laptop. I have it on an incline and I can, adjust it as needed. So I was able to adjust myself so that you can see me. Do we need to start using these inclined risers for students to put their communication board on? Are they able to access the communication flat, or do they need that riser again for limited mobility? A lot of times your students with muscular dystrophy or CP, sometimes they will need these accommodations so that they can better access. Are they spastic? Do they just tend to be behavioral and tend to move things around a lot? Are they sliding these things across the table, across the board? So can we use things like Velcro or Dyson to hold things in place and to keep them stable so they're not rocking and moving all over, and they are, again, better able to access. We have to think, when we're using a board or we're using something to communicate and it slides from us, they can hit the wrong word, they can hit the wrong meaning. Maybe they're not giving you the right message that they were intending. And one thing that I've noticed from a lot of my students, and I've actually had some of my minimally verbal students tell me this, I'm left-handed, and they want me to make things left-handed. So a lot of times we make binders and we make communication books that are great for right-handed students. But when we give it to somebody with the left hand and they're trying, they've got these marks and they've got these bindings on their arm and it's not comfortable, it's not easy. Are they going to be willing to use this if they're not enjoying using it, if it's not comfortable, if it's painful to them? So again, sometimes I take a binder and I hold it upside down and I make a left-handed binder for my left-handed students. So we need to look into these considerations as well. And please, by all means, ladies, if you have any questions, you can stop me at any time. Put it in the chat, unmute and, speak. I love communication. I love interacting. Some visual accommodations that we can do is color contrast. So like this is a high contrast board. You can use high contrasting colors. There are also boards for students who have color blindness, and you can literally look up their type of color blindness and it'll tell you what chart or what coloring is best to use with them. And you can accommodate by putting a blue background or, depending on their color scheme that they can see. You can change the print or picture size. Again, for visual impairments, maybe they can't handle 16 symbols on a page because it's too small. So we need to put less symbols and make them larger. Sometimes there's seating or positioning. Are they positioned right in front? And sometimes if they're, nearsighted, sometimes they want to be sitting in the back and they don't want to be up front. It's easier for them to see from the back. So we need to look at their positioning. Are they stronger in one eye versus the other? Do we want to maybe shift their chair sideways or have them seated on your right side or your left side, depending on what they can see better with? And again, the color blindness that we can access and accommodate. For hearing impairments, some accommodations that we can do, so hearing accommodations, we need to look at, are they auditorily impaired? So do they have hearing aids? Do they have a cochlear, or do they have nothing to accommodate their hearing impairment? And you want to look, for their hearing aids, do they have batteries in them? Because a lot of my students, I had one student who absolutely was not listening to anything that anybody was saying. And the teacher was getting so frustrated and determined. She's like, Mom said she has her hearing aids in. I know she can hear me. She's just ignoring me. And I took out the hearing aid and I found out the batteries were dead. The moms didn't realize, the teacher didn't know. And, I literally just did a battery change and she was a whole other kid. So are we paying attention to those things? Cochlear implants. They are amazing, but when did they get them? Did they get them at the age where they were still learning language, or did they get them later in life? Did they just get that cochlear right before you saw them as a client? And are they aware of what sounds are coming at them and are aware to use and understand that language? Or is it something that they've had for a long time? Auditory distractions within the room. Is your office next to a train station, a bus stop? Are these things distracting them? Do we need to put, some curtains up? Do we need to put some sound muffling boards on the walls? Do we need to put some textures up to maybe muffle some of those sounds and help it out? I had one student that I had gotten one of those door wedges that you can put under your door to, keep a draft from coming in. I would put that under my door for the student because I found that any little noise in the hallway, and I mean any little noise, it could just be somebody slightly walking outside very quietly, would distract him and he would stare at the door and be distracted from me. So just by putting that divider, it helped block some of that noise and some of that distraction. And do they have an auditory processing disorder? And if so, what kind? What accommodations can you give them for auditory processing and hearing and knowing what was going on? Some accessories we can do for hearing, we can give headphones. So headphones can either be plugged into a sound source, or a lot of times I get headphones that have no cord, or I cut the cord off and I literally just use them as sound blocking for my students that are just overly stimulated, that I still want them to hear me, but we want to muffle a little bit. So I'll put those on. And it's great, for those students that are just very sensitive auditorily, to block some of that outside sound, some of that noise, and help them better focus. Do they have an FM or another assisted listening system that we can use? Is it a personal FM, or is it one for the classroom? And how can we adjust it so that it best suits that child? Do they need timers? Some students are auditory learners. They're better auditorily. And just by something as simple as setting a timer for them, they know that it's time for them to use their board, or it's time for them to, to pay attention to you. Or I would set a timer every 3 minutes for one student, and it was just a little beep, beep. But just by doing that, it got the student to turn and look at me and pay attention again to our conversation. So it was just a little auditory reminder that here I am, we're communicating. Let's pay attention again. And he got adjusted to the fact that every time he heard that beep, beep sound, he knew to turn, look at me, and we were back on focus for our communication. And once communication was over, he would go over and press the stop on it because he knew we didn't need it anymore. So getting them to be a partner in that communication as well, and having some control over it. Sound buttons are great. And again, sometimes, you can make an amazing PEX board again, and that student doesn't want anything to do with it because there's no sound involved. So sometimes having a go talk instead of a PEX board might get them to communicate more. They know that they press it and they hear it. Sometimes, having just a one touch button that they can press that main communicative need. So that main thing that they need help with. So somebody who's maybe toilet training. I use this a lot for EI when I work with my littles and their toilet training, and they don't have the words yet. And we have a one touch button that just says bathroom, and they hit it and they go to the bathroom because that's a word they need easy and quick access to. And I don't want them struggling to find that word or learn it or say it. And I want them to be able to say it immediately. So they press that button, they're ready to go. And then closed captioning. How can you use that when you're doing YouTube videos, when you're doing these songs, when we're doing audiobooks, when we're doing things like that? Let's try to put the closed captioning up. And again, take their visual accommodation into consideration and see what sizing they would need. And again, closed captioning is not for everybody. So obviously these are for your readers, not your non-readers. But we sometimes have those kids that are hyperlexic and they love seeing those extra words. So let's put that closed captioning up and maybe they'll get that communicative message easier. And then we look at their sensory and emotional limitations. So are they regulated and ready to communicate? A lot of times we have those students that are just on the floor wailing and having a tantrum or a meltdown, and I will go through the difference between the two. And they are just not communicating their needs. And then you're getting frustrated. The teacher's getting frustrated. Why won't you just tell me what you need? When you're really upset, are you able to give your message across to your communicative partner? You just need that moment. You need that time off. So sometimes they're not ready, and we can just give them the tools, and we'll go through, and I'm going to give you a few slides and some things that we can go through on there that can get them to have like that better time and what's going on. So we look at their tactile limitations, visual, hearing, olfactory, so sense of smell. Sometimes there are smells that trigger good feelings, and sometimes there's smells that trigger bad feelings. So again, knowing what your room smells like. I had a student that was in the teacher's room, and the teacher had like these beautiful fall scents, and it was great. The student, every time they walked in, did not like the smell of pumpkin. It made them nauseous. So every time they were in there, they weren't able to tell that to the teacher, but it would make them nauseous. They would get upset and literally throw themselves on the floor and roll all over and get upset. And we found out little by little, they didn't do it in any other room, and not with that teacher in any other room. So we said, there must be something in this room. And when we got rid of the scents, the child was fine. So again, things that we won't really pay attention to. But when you think about it, there are certain smells that trigger happy feelings in you. And there's certain smells that you smell them and you're just like, I can't be in this room. I can't be around this. And when you're hyper focused on that sensory, it will affect them a lot more. We have to look at their focus and attention levels, and then their personal issues. So again, when you have a good day, when you have a bad day, what's going on? What did that client deal with before coming to you that are they ready to communicate with you? Are they upset? Are they overly happy and excited and want to talk about something else? Take their personal issues into consideration. I had a student this morning who had an absolute meltdown, could not get off the bus. I literally just parked in the parking lot. I'm walking towards the building, and here she was, scream crying, an assistant, the teacher, and the bus aide trying to get her off the bus, and she was not getting on those stairs. When I got on there, I was able to assess the situation. I realized she had an accident. Even though she was wearing a diaper, she was very upset, very overly emotionally upset. And then by texting mom, we found out that she has an aversion to the potty. She is absolutely afraid because she's brand new to us. We've only known the student a few days. She is deathly afraid of the bathroom. So potty training has become very scary for her, very upsetting. And by having an accident, it made her even more upset. So she was not ready to go inside and admit to people that she had an accident, that she had a moment that made her upset. So again, knowing that coming in, I was able to talk her out of it and tell her it was okay. We know you had an accident. It's fine. Nobody's upset with you. Nobody's sad. We're going to get you cleaned up so you feel better, so you smell better. She walked down the stairs with me and was able to come into the building. So again, looking at that level. Some emotional or sensory accommodations you can make in your therapy space. You can create various spaces in your room. So you can have a tactile board, a sensory bin or sensory board, tactile toys, some fidget toys, stuffies, that's what I call my stuffed animals, or your squishies, your squeeze toys. Musical instruments are always a great one to help calm them and regulate. Even just, two sticks that they can tap together can sometimes help to regulate a child. Sound toys are always great. Puppy sounds that, they'll jump and bark at you. Baby crying, things like that they love to play with. Cars or trains that make train and car sounds. Hand puppets or finger puppets are always a great one. A lot of my little kiddos, especially with my EI, they love putting finger puppets on each of their fingers. And even if they just keep one on each finger and they just keep it there and wiggle it while we're talking and we're working, it helps give them that sensory input and helps focus them and regulate them. And then we're going to talk about the next three on the upcoming slides. So co-regulating activities, up-regulating, and down-regulating. So basically, we have to recognize their emotions. We need to understand their emotions. Then we can work to regulate them. And once we regulate, we can use those emotions to achieve the goals that we need to successful communication. So we're going to start with co-regulation. So the co-regulation is the process where two individuals in a relationship help each other to regulate their emotions and manage stress. So for co-regulation, I am taking that child or that client, and again, we can use this with any age, and I'm getting them to work with me. I have to be their communicative partner at that moment in time. I have to work with them directly. It can be you, it can be their personal assistant, it could be their teacher, but they need a partner for communication in this aspect. So some co-regulating activities that you can do is walk slowly with them, not a fast walk, not a run down the hall, We are walking slowly down the hall together, or slowly around our room if our room is big enough. We are coloring together, and that is with crayons. Crayons give you better proprioceptive reception than crayons, than markers or colored pencils. So crayon coloring together. Ball tossing, so just throwing a ball back and forth. Again, not slamming it, not bouncing it, just tossing it back and forth. So we are regulating together. We're going to throw it in unison back and forth at each other. Breathing in unison. So take a deep breath with me. And breathing together, doing that in unison, that client again is looking at you, focusing on you, and they can co-regulate their breathing and calm down with you. And just a simple eye gaze. So sometimes I have that student or that client that I just walk by and I look at them and I'm just keeping my eyes on them, not staring them down, not making them feel like you're giving them a hard time or you're upset with them, just looking at them like, I am here for you. I'm with you. I understand you. And when you want to talk, we're ready to talk. Charlene, I just saw your message here, thinking in terms of lighting. Absolutely. It is very distracting. I love the blue covers to dim the lights. And one of my therapists in my district actually did something great. I went into her office the other day and she had, there were these covered panels that she got from Amazon, and they were heat regulated. You can put them on the lighting in the school, and it was not a fire hazard, safe in every way, shape, and form. So that was good. But they were like clouds and little moons and things like that. And she put them to dim those glaring lights. So you're absolutely right. The lighting in schools are very distracting and can be really difficult for the regulation in the within the classroom. So absolutely, I agree with you on that. Upregulation is our next thing here. So when you upregulate, it's the opposite. So it's the process of increasing a response to a stimulus. These are for your students that, no other way to explain it, they're just blah. They're just there. They're sitting there. They look like they want nothing to do with anything they're doing in this room. They're falling asleep at their desk. They're sitting across from you looking like they just are staring off into space and want nothing to do with you. So this is when the upregulation comes in. We want to bring them up. We want to wake them up. We want to bring them into our realm and get them ready to communicate. So what are some upregulating activities that you can do? Jumping, shaking, fast swimming, swinging. You can do fast swimming if you do aquatics, but I don't have access to that, unfortunately. But fast swinging. So even just that little client, you can pick them up and just swing them back and forth. Or if you have a rocker or swinger, you can sit them in it and just rock them back and forth fast. Some soothing touch. So not too calming, because that, again, that's a down regulating activity, but maybe some, rapid touch up and back and forth. We can bring it back and just get them upregulated as well. And then rapid breath work. So again, we're breathing together, but we're doing it fast. We're doing it quick. We're bringing it up. We're doing it nice and rapid to wake us up, to get that body moving and shaking and upregulated, as the saying goes, as the word goes. And I wanted to go back to the point that I brought up, meltdown versus a tantrum. So a lot of times they're like, oh, they're having such a tantrum. They keep tantruming. The majority of the time, our students are not tantruming. They're having a meltdown. And it's very different. So when you tantrum, you are intentionally knowing what you're doing. You're in control. You are waiting for a response and trying to get a response. So you're having that fit, that meltdown. And yes, absolutely, Terry. Dancing is a very big one, but some great music, getting them up and moving, dancing and wiggling. I love doing movement songs and wiggling, and there's a lot of great YouTube videos that are out there. I'll just put on briefly, and we'll dance and jump and sing in the beginning, and then we're ready to go. But again, with the tantrums, they are intentionally, those are the kids that are on the floor and screaming, and they're looking at you with that one eye. And the second you ignore them, you walk away, they get quiet, and then you come closer and they start screaming and yelling again. That's a tantrum. A meltdown is when they truly cannot control what is going on. It's out of their realm. They are overwhelmed, either sensory, auditorily, something happened to really set them off. We weren't able to stop it before it got too far, and they are having a meltdown. That's when a lot of these activities can help as well, because they cannot control, and a lot of times they don't have the words to tell you that they are having a meltdown, what they need or what they're upset about. So by doing these activities, we can get them to that stasis, that moment of calm, and then we can find out what is going on and they can better communicate their needs with us. So down regulating is the opposite. So we want to reduce the intensity of the emotions. So these are your kids that maybe you're a child with ADD who just can't sit down and is running back and forth across the room, jumping nonstop, fidgeting, hitting, tapping, the one that comes in your room and is like playing drums on everything and just cannot sit down and regulate, sitting in the chair and bouncing nonstop and can't focus. So for that student, you want to do some down regulating activities. So that's when you can do some of that sensitive, calming touch, a little softer, let's do some soft massage. Let's bring it down. We can do some deep breathing together, but nice and slow. We're going to take a deep breath in and a deep breath out. There are now breathing sticker strips, and I wish I had one in front of me, but there are sticker strips that now have tactile sensitivity to them, and it literally will say breathe, hold, breathe, hold. And those are great. I use them. I have them stuck on my therapy tables. And it really just helps give them that moment of calm and that moment to breathe and bring down and get themselves regulated. We can do some meditation. And this can be very brief because I know a lot of people are like, I don't have time for this. I have 30 minutes with this client and I don't have time for this. The meditation can literally take 30 seconds. Just look at me, focus. We're going to calm. We're going to take a deep breath in. We're going to take it out and we're ready. We can put calming music. And again, this can be briefly or it could be in the background. So listening to some orchestral music, some calming music. And calming music for you is not always calming music for the child. So sometimes we might want to, I have one class where the teacher loves listening to like Mozart. And one of her kids actually gets agitated every time he hears it. But you to put on some reggaeton really quiet in the background, and he's the calmest thing in the world. And he will actually focus on everything. He just has that music rhythm in the background and he's happy. So again, looking at what is great for them, in each aspect. Oh yes, thank you, Dawn. There is a difference between meltdown and tantrums, and people don't realize sometimes between the two, and they treat a meltdown like a tantrum and you won't get the same results. And yes, techniques for soothing EI clients. So I do this a lot with my littles. I have a sensory little brush. And if you don't want to buy a sensory brush, you can literally buy a bristle brush from Dollar Tree and it works great. Just a soft little brush, and I brush their arms very calmly. And we do brushing together in the beginning. Or we can do just some deep pressure where I just hold their arms and we just do a little squeeze, and I can have them hug themselves if they don't want to be touched, and they can do their own hugging, and I model for them and show them, and we do that. Sometimes they need that swinging, so depending if they need to be upregulated or downregulated. So I'll hold them under their arms and I'll swing them back and forth a few times, and that motion will give them that proprioceptive feedback. They get that deep pressure under their arms from me, and they're also getting that swinging, calming, and it helps to regulate them for, to the start. Also just some calming voice. So sometimes I come in, I tend to be very loud, and I come in the room like, hi, how are you? Hey, what's up? And I have some clients that just don't respond to that. So I have one little guy that I have to come in, and from the second I open the door, I have to get down to his level and I have to be really quiet. I'm like, hi, are we okay today? How are we doing? How are you feeling? And I'm just really, really quiet and toned down. And I have my other clients that I have to be a clown walking in the room, or they're not paying attention to me and they want nothing to do with me. So again, knowing your client, knowing their individual needs, it really is individualized. We know that working in this field. What works for one kid won't work for the next 10. So you really have to regulate for each. A lot of my adult clients are very, very, very different with what they need and what they want. And regulating and making sure that we do it age appropriately and what is appropriate for that setting or that age level. We can do some yoga here. So I found that sometimes I do like a 5-minute yoga, and I have like 3 and 5-minute yoga videos that I use when I'm doing a whole group lesson or a whole class lesson. When I go into that classroom and I'm working with an entire group, even with my pre-K or my kindergarten kids, it's really great. And again, we'll do that 5-minute yoga. We're just going to stretch, and we do animal yoga, and we make animal poses, and we do all these silly things, and it really just helps regulate them. And even my teachers have found that, and again, my in-class support classes, it works. And they find that, they'll use it on every day, even when I'm not there. because they find that it helps regulate their class. It helps start them out in the morning. And the kids really just need that break. And they'll use it after lunch sometimes to regulate them and bring them back and get them ready for the second half of the day. Blowing bubbles is a calming, soothing activity. And this is another great one for EI. So sometimes you're like, well, how do you blow bubbles indoors? You're working with them in their living room. I'm not trying to make a big mess. Grab a tiny little bubble bottle. Again, they're at the Dollar Tree for a 6-pack. And you can use, they blow out the tiniest little bubbles. They do not leave a wet mess. And it's really great to use for them. Again, just to calm, they pop the bubbles, they look at it. It's great. You can do a nature or a garden walk. I have to say I'm very blessed in my school. We have a school garden. It's gorgeous. One of my teachers made it, and she made like a whole little sensory garden where there's smelly flowers and plants and ones that you can touch and ones that you can do. And I find that with some of my students, just doing a little nature walk, we'll come outside and we'll have our session outside in the garden sometimes. If you don't have access to that, just taking a walk down the hallway, taking a walk in their backyard. If this is an EI client, I have one little guy that loves walking in the grass barefoot, and it just really helps to calm him down. So we'll go outside and we'll walk in the grass, we'll blow some bubbles, and he's ready for the rest of the session. Belly breathing. So for those who are familiar with, especially for fluency techniques, we do a lot of belly breathing. We do a lot of focusing on bringing in that air from your belly, expanding, making yourself look like a big preggy and bringing that belly out. Oh, I got a fat belly, a fat belly. And I tell them, I just had a big lunch, and they joke and they see who can have the biggest belly. And we sit there and we take those deep breaths in, and then we let it out, and that can help calm us. And focusing on that breathing can really help us. With little, sometimes they don't understand that technique. So what I'll do is I'll take like a little stuffed animal, and I'll give them their own little stuffy, and they put it on their stomach, and you have to see the stuff. Oh, stuffy has to get really out. Let's see how far out we can push it out and how close we can suck it back in. And they think it's fun and it's calming, and they're playing along with us. And then soothing water play. So this is not taking a big water toy and splashing and throwing all over the place. Now this is soothing water play. So looking at enclosed water toys where they have the shapes or the animals inside or letters, and we can play with that. Looking at like lava lamps, and I make them with my students sometimes, where we'll take a bottle and we make our own lava lamps, and these can work to help calm them and regulate them. And just flipping it upside down and having it on the table, something for them to visualize and look at while they're working with you. You'll be amazed at how much more language you're getting out of them. And yes, Charlene, these are able to be used for everybody. So I've used these with some of my stroke clients as well that I've worked with that are older. Actually, just speaking about the lava lamp that we made, I made this with a stroke group, and they absolutely loved the activity. I came in with these crafts, and they looked at me like, who is this crazy lady that's coming in with like these kitty looking crafts? But when they saw my finished product and I showed them what it was like, they're like, oh, that's kind of cool. And then they started wanting to pick their own colors and their own, sparkles and what they wanted to put in it. And after I left again at the agency, they told me that they're all using it in their room, and they're sitting there shaking it, and they're putting it upside down. And it really just helped calm them whenever they get frustrated or they get upset with me. So again, just making sure that you're making it accommodating. I'm not going to bring, little fuzzy toys or certain things for certain clients. But again, if you change it for their age or their functioning level, you'll be amazed at how much more you'll get from them. Some focus activities. So focusing is really hard. I have difficulty focusing, my head is in 50 places, and I just, sometimes these are great for you as well to get regulated for that next session or that next group, or, you just had a rough meeting and now you got to pick up a kid, or you just drove in a lot of traffic and now you're at this client's house. Sometimes these are great for you as well, just to give yourself a few minutes of bringing it down, bringing it, to that level, and then we're able to focus again. So some of these activities that we can do, does anybody know what heavy work is? Because I was surprised when I presented, a lot of people didn't know what heavy work was. No, okay. And again, because I did this presentation last week for all of my MD and autism teachers in the district, and I think 1 or 2 people knew what heavy work was. So again, I guess it's one of these newer terms. So heavy work is literally just what it means, heavy work. So I have like a bookshelf in my room, and I have one of my students just really has a tough time focusing and regulating. So I always magically have a stack of books I need him to put away. They're heavy books. I know they're not too heavy for him. He can handle them, but he's got to pick them up and put them up on the shelf and then come back. That's heavy work. Or sharpening pencils. So I'll give them, I have so many new packs of pencils. Again, I go and buy them from the Dollar Tree. It's a pack of 10 pencils. I really need you to sharpen these 10 pencils for me. But you can't sharpen them in the, the mechanical sharpener. That's too easy. I need you to use the hand sharpener. That's heavy work. Using weighted vests is great, but you have to be careful with that because you can't use it for more than 15, 20 minutes at a time, and then they don't need it anymore. But weighted vest is another type of heavy work. But the weighted vest is more of a down regulating activity because that pressure helps focus and regulate them. But if you want to make it heavy work, you can have them hold that weighted vest and they've got to pick it up and put it on the shelf and then take it off and bring it down a few times. And that's a great way of turning it into heavy work. Another thing we can do is delivering something to another classroom. So sometimes I'll have that kid who I see, 10 minutes into my session is not focusing and they're really not paying attention to what we're doing. And I'm like, can you do me a huge favor? I need to give this envelope. And I always, again, magically have an envelope that's random. It's sealed. There's nothing in it. Or it's just a little note inside. Hi, how are you? And I have a teacher or two that they know if they get this envelope, they know what it's for. And I'll be like, can you please deliver this to, Ms. Giorgio over in room 143? And I want you to bring that over to her. And they're like, they love doing the work. They run down the hall. They give it to the teacher. They come back. They're now ready to work with me. So again, that heavy work is just really great to get them working, get them focused. Exercising. So again, heavier than yoga. Let's do a couple aerobic movements. Let's go up and down a step. Let's go, let's do some jumping jacks. Let's stand up and, I want 10 jumping jacks. I want arm raises and then touch your toes 5 times. Let's spin around 3 times. Not too many times. You don't want them spinning and falling, but just getting up and spinning. I have spinny chairs in my, in the one conference room that I use with my older kids. And I'll tell them, all right, spinning competition before we start. Let's see who can do the most spins in 30 seconds. And I'll have them really spin like crazy in their chair. And then, believe it or not, they're ready to work and they focus on the reading activity we're doing for the next 30 minutes. Again, listening to music can be either way, either calming music or loud music, depending what the student needs, and knowing what kind of regulation would help them with. Sleep. I know it sounds horrible, but sometimes just let them sleep. Sometimes they're tired, and you're not going to get anything out of them, but giving them a quick 5, 10, 15-minute break, not longer than that. But just letting them sleep. And sometimes I tell my teachers, just let them sleep. If they're really that exhausted, because they're like, they just won't wake up. They can't wait. They went to bed too late. So you're not going to get anything out of them, but give them that nap in the morning or after lunch or whenever they need it. And you're going to see how much more you're going to get out of them. And I already had a teacher call me today. You know what? I started letting him have a 10-minute nap in the morning. We set a timer and the kid's with me the rest of the day. So sometimes that works. Video games. I know people are very averse to video games, but depending on what kind of video game it is, sometimes it can help with focus and help with attention. So a lot of the games, I'm not talking about the games where you just randomly hit things or you shoot things or you're just randomly jumping from one place to the other. Games that have a beginning and an end. You have an end game. You're trying to get to the end. You have to hit all of the X's until you get to something. You have to walk on all the blue trails, and we really have to focus on walking on just the blue trail. Looking at games that are memory games or balance games, or looking at focusing on that. Those will help with brain training and with focusing. And again, brain training games. So the games of memory. And we can do this on a iPad, on a laptop. We can do it, the actual memory game. I don't know if anybody still has that. I still do, where I put out memory cards and they have to match them. That can really help with focus as well. And again, I won't put out the whole board because I know it's going to take too long. I might just take a set of 6. We have to make 3 matches and then we're ready to focus for the rest of the session. And if I see I'm losing them again, I'll take out 6 more and we'll take another quick break. And then we're back to focusing again. And then again, balance. Sometimes we have balance beams or balance things that we could do. Sometimes literally just taking a jump rope. Again, Dollar Tree is my favorite place to go. I get a jump rope. I put it on the floor. It's just flat on the floor. You got to walk the straight line path until you get to the end of the rope. And they love it. And I'm like, oh, the floor is lava. If you fall over, you're in the lava. And they think it's hysterical. Or you're going to fall into the ocean. We got to stay on the path. And again, they're walking on that. And it really just helps focus them and regain their attention for the session. And then the main important thing we have to remember, communication will happen when they're ready and when they're able. If we give them all of the tools that they need communicatively, and we give them the sensory, and we give them the physical, and we give them all of this, communication will happen. We have to make sure they're in balance. We have to check our checklist, make sure that everything that they need is met, and then we'll get to what we need. And that is the end of my presentation for you.